What you're about to see, from my point of view, is probably the most important information that I could give. You could know everything about the Merkaba and how to create the fields, and you could know the cities, you could know everything else on the creation of the Merkaba and how it works, but without making the connection with the higher self, you wouldn't have the wisdom that would be necessary to actually use the Merkaba. And so what I'm about to give is everything I now know, and this is always constantly growing. It's an organic structure that's happening. For a long time, when I taught this in the classes, and especially for any of you who've seen the old videos, and I gave a specific technique to connect with higher self. I gave this technique because it was the one that I used, or at least I thought that I had used, in the very beginning. But when I would watch the students that came to the class, I discovered that only maybe 50% or so of them were able to make the connection with higher self. And then there was this large group of people who, no matter how hard they tried, or whatever they did, or how long they struggled, or how much they meditated, nothing would happen. And after doing this for a few years, I began to suspect that I was missing something. Back in May of 1993, I asked my higher self to give me the information that I was missing. I knew that I needed more, and would it please teach me so that I could teach others how to do this. It was no more than a month later, in June of 1993, at a workshop in, I think it was Olympia, Washington, that as I was signing up the people for this workshop, one man came through the door. He was perhaps in his 50s. And when I looked at him and I could see his aura, I could see no reason why this person was at my workshop. And so at one point I went up to him and I said, what are you doing at my workshop? You don't need to be here. And he says, I don't know. He says, I don't know why I'm here. I just think I'm supposed to be here. And so the workshop continued, and after 2 or 3 days, I went up to him again and started talking to him, and found out that he was a kahuna from Hawaii, and so I asked him, I said, well, what do you, he says he was a teacher, and I said, what do you teach? And he says, I specialize in one thing, and that's connecting with higher self. And so when it came time for me to teach about higher self, I put him up on the stage, and I sat down in the audience, figured he knew more about it than I did, which he did. And he talked for about an hour and a half, and I really learned a lot in what he had to say. Originally, the procedure or the method that I was teaching on how to reach the higher self, I would talk about how you would go into the spherical breathing, and then once you would attain that, you would then write down on a piece of paper of a specific, asking for the higher self to give a very specific test so that you could prove you had made connection with higher self. And then you would go into the meditation, go very, very deeply, and ask for the higher self, invoke the higher self to come in, and then ask it for a test, something that you could literally do and go out and do that would demonstrate absolutely to you that you had made this connection, from which you could go from there on forth. And that worked with some people. But the reason that it didn't work with the others was now becoming clear. My understanding of it was that there was me, and then there was my higher self. I wasn't aware that I had a lower self. I wasn't aware of this. Now, according to the Huna knowledge that this kahuna was giving to me, there are these 3 levels of existence that human are connected with. And since we know that everything comes in 3s, I should have suspected it a long time ago. There is the higher self, there is us on this everyday level, and there is this lower self. And according to the kahuna, you cannot reach the higher self, at least they've never figured out how. You can't reach the higher self by going directly to the higher self. You first have to go, not up, but down. You have to go down to the lower self and connect with that. The lower self, according to the Huna knowledge, is the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind, according to this kahuna, he was saying that it was like a child. It was about 2 to 4 years old. Though recently I connected with another kahuna who felt that it was more like 4 to 6 years old. So I don't know. It's somewhere in there. It's a child anyway. It's 2, 4, 6 years old. And this is the level of awareness that you're dealing with on the subconscious mind. And so what the kahuna says is that you must first connect with the subconscious mind, but in order to do that, you can't do it from your sophisticated adult world. You could go into meditation and meditate and become extremely serious about what you're doing. But the more that you do that, the less likely you're going to connect with higher self, with lower self. In order to connect with lower self, you must become childlike. And I don't mean being silly and giggling around and stuff like that. I mean that innocent place of a child, when you look into their eyes and you see no ego, and you see this innocent child, that part of that aspect of us is in every one of us, that's been suppressed and pushed down. And we must, in one way or another, allow that part of us to come out to begin the process. Some of you perhaps have read this book by James Redfield, The Celestine Prophecy. This would be a good book if you want to read what I'm really talking about in making this particular connection. The child, when it finds itself in nature or in any situation, its attention level is focused directly and precisely on the here and the now and what is being presented directly to them. And it is this attention and this innocence that we have to begin to cultivate inside of ourselves. And so when James Redfield talks about going out and connecting with the trees, which was the way the Druids used to do this, the trees are very powerful spirits. And in that connection through life, through the nature of the reality, and through this particular innocence, this childlike innocence, this is the doorway, this magical doorway through something can begin to happen that if you have never experienced it or you don't know what it is, it's very, very hard to believe until you can actually do it and see what it is. This is what happened to me, and I didn't know that it was happening to me. I went to Vietnam. I was over in this war over there. I got very discouraged over humanity. And I came back and I thought, well, okay, I'm going to find God. And I decided I was going to do it by becoming a physicist. And so I went into the University of California and studied physics and mathematics and all this stuff, looking for God. And got very discouraged in all of that way also. And I did this during the late 60s. And imagine being in Berkeley, California in the 60s when there was machine guns on the corners and tanks everywhere and macing people, and I really got discouraged. The whole war that was in Vietnam was carried over. And what I did was and especially in 1970 when I graduated, was the time of Kent State, when all this, some of you may not remember, but the colleges of the United States closed down. And I just said, this is it. That's the last straw. And I came here to Canada. And I came not very far away from here, actually. And I found peace, and I found beauty, and I found a home out in the middle of nowhere in the mountains. And I decided to do what I always wanted to do, and that was to go live in the woods with no money or anything at all and just live off the land. So I always wanted to do that, and I did it. And I mean, I really did it. I lived on I had no money, and it didn't even matter because I'd learned how to live really, really easily. But in doing that, all my fantasies began to come out. You know, and I used to go out and begin to talk to the trees and the lakes and the water, and I began to see that everything was alive and conscious. And the more that I lived out my fantasies and the more that I did exactly what I always wanted to do, not doing what someone else wanted me to do, but what I really wanted to do, the happier I got, the more excited I got about life. I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be so excited I could hardly stand it that another day on planet Earth was here, and I was ecstatic all the time. It was in pure joy. And it just kept getting better and better and better. I got to the place where animals would come right up to me. I could walk right up to deer, I mean right up to them, and look at them right in the face, and they'd look right back at me, and they wouldn't even be afraid. And because I didn't have anything in me that was challenging them or causing fear. And I could walk right past bears, and they would just sort of look at me, and there was no anything. My wife actually would, I remember one time walked right up to a bear that was eating a deer, which is like the most craziest thing you could do by normal ways of thinking because they'll just kill you. And she walked up to him and sat right down with him and watched him eat this. And the bear didn't even, just looked at her and just kept right on going. And even now, when we were out one place, she'd just walk up and pick up a rattlesnake and look at it and put it down with no problem because there was nothing going on. Well, it was in this kind of state that I reached unconsciously that I began to connect with my lower self, with the subconscious mind. And what I now know is the subconscious mind, my subconscious mind, is linked directly to the subconscious mind of the planet and to all nature everywhere. And so, really, when you're really talking about the subconscious mind, you're talking about the consciousness of the planet, the whole being of the planet. First, the coincidences begin to happen. I would think something and it would just happen. I would wish I would see a friend and he would just walk out of the woods. Just one thing after another, after another, after another. And the coincidences began to fall so fast and so quick that I began to suspect that something was really going on with me. I didn't know what it was, but I did notice that this was happening way too often to just be pure coincidence. And then one day, when we had decided to study meditation, one day we were sitting there and we were meditating, and poof, these two big angels appear in the room. They were both about 10 feet tall, and one was purple and one was green, translucent. You could see through them, and they were identical, and they were incredibly beautiful. And the love that was coming from them was just incredible. And I didn't know what it was. The first thing they said to us was, "We are you," on another level, another time. I didn't know what they meant. And I just started, it was so beautiful, and my wife and I both connected with this at the same time. It was so beautiful that we just started following this. And soon after that, the miracles began to happen. Things began to happen that just can't happen, but they did happen. And first one, and then two, and then things started happening every day. Every day of my life, for 2 or 3 years there, I watched things happen that just simply can't happen. But it was so much fun, I didn't care. I had let go, I didn't care anymore. I mean, I cared, I really cared, but I didn't care about the old way of thinking. And, you know, it didn't matter to me what anyone thought. This felt right. And I kept going in this direction. And one of the things they said which I never understood, was that about the green and purple angel being the earth and the sun. The green angel was the spirit of the earth, which had this sort of a Kelly green, beautiful, clear, pristine color, and that the angel of the sun was sort of this ultraviolet color. And at one point I got it, I understood. I remember they had this experience, and I came back and I tried to put it into words, and it came out into a poem that just said, I am the sun, I am the earth, I am the sun, and yet really I'm neither one. Meaning that I knew that I was even beyond all of that. I understood. And but I didn't understand it in terms of words that I could communicate to anyone. And so I now feel that where we begin in this is through working to bring out the inner child and the inner innocence, and I think that nature is the place. Out of these synthetic environments. Get out of these things that we have created in these rooms and these cars. Get into the trees, and preferably even out of the country if you can, so that you're out of the very mindset that you're normally in. And to begin to interact with Mother Earth again from a whole new way. This is where I would suggest that you begin trying, and not in the actual meditation itself. You can continue to do the meditation and to keep working along those lines, but I think that for many people this is going to be an essential step. Now what the kahunas say is that at one point, after you've made connection with the lower self, with the subconscious mind, and what happens is you have to play with it. You have to have fun. You have to enjoy yourself. That's essential. If you're not having fun, something's wrong. Start over again. Go back to go. The having fun it's really, really important. And in fact, there's a movie around this very thing that we're talking about called Hook. Many of you have seen about Peter Pan, and how Peter Pan is remembering his self as a child, and the things that he's going through there, and the things where he imagines the food on the table and all this, for those of you who've seen this. And if you haven't seen this, I highly recommend you go and see this relative to all this. There is a tremendous amount of truth. The whole play between the good and evil and all of that that's going on there is really it's a very sophisticated movie. And so you've got to play. And then what happens eventually, you will begin to see the coincidence happen. You'll begin to feel the life flow moving through you and the connection. You'll begin to see the auras around people and trees and beings, and the little spirits of plants and the divas that are real beings that become alive, and you can see them, and they come out. There are ultraviolet fields of light that you can see, and all these things begin to start taking place. And then you know you're on the right path. You know for sure. But the thing is about reaching to the higher self, is that you have to ask permission from the lower self, from Earth, to connect to the higher self, which, in my way of seeing it, is the sun. And you have to ask permission to connect from the Earth to the sun, from the higher to the lower self, from the lower to the higher self. But the lower self may not allow you to. It may say, no, I don't want to do it. Let's play some more. And there's nothing you can do. You just got to have more fun. That's all you can do. You just have to keep having fun. And you just have to wait until the Earth thinks you are ready. In her wisdom, as a mother, when she sees you being her child, then she will, at the right time, allow you to go up and make the connection, not toward the Earth, but away out toward the sun and out to all life everywhere else. And there's just nothing you can do but just move with this. And it's okay. It's the way that it's been set up. I didn't even know I was doing it. I didn't understand it. I was just doing it without knowing why or anything else. At one point, though, and many, many, many people out there in the Ascension community who believe that they are connected to their higher self are probably really connected to their lower self. Because you can ask information from your lower self and get any kind of information you can imagine. Anything doing with dowsing, etc., and all these kind of things. These are all lower self connections. You can know anything through dowsing. You can know where anything is. You can know anything. But you're really connecting with your lower self and through the earth, not to your higher self. Your higher self is not going to be concerned with those kinds of things. And, but for me anyway, when I made connection with higher self, what happened was this golden angel began to become apparent in my field of vision, usually off in the back. And I would ask the other one, who's this angel over there? And they just would say, well, that's the golden angel. You'll eventually learn about the golden angel. I remember one time they said, okay, they came to us and they said, the golden angel wants to talk to you. And so we did this whole thing. We fasted for like 3 days and we waited and we thought the golden angel was going to come in and tell us, something that was going to totally change our lives. And it did say something extremely important, though it was so simple we didn't understand. We thought it was going to be a long something or other that we were going to go into. So we got all prepared and we waited and the golden angel comes in. And we sat there and looked at him and we were waiting. Okay, what are you going to say? What are you going to say? And he just looks at us very gently and says, it's only light. And goes away. Right over the top of our heads. It's only light? What do you mean it's only light? We didn't get it. It took me many years later to get that. That was like E equals MC squared. I didn't know what they meant. Though at one point I slowly began to understand what they really did mean by that. And then finally, I noticed that as I was beginning to communicate with my lower self, that the lower self would give me any kind of information I needed. In fact, there was a period of 6 months where the lower self told me every single thing that was going to happen the next day in great detail. I mean exactly down to when the telephones were going to ring down to the minute and what they were going to say and the letters I was going to get and everything else like this. And you can ask all kinds of information from the lower self, and they'll usually gladly give it to you, no problem. And so, but it's a polarity form of communication that was going on. I was talking to something that appeared to be outside of me. And then I noticed that in the beginning the communication was happening 3 and 4 times a day. But as time went on and the years went by, I began to realize that the angels began to appear less and less and less. Not that my connection to the earth was any less. I felt that all the time. But I didn't seem to need them very much. And then one day, about 3 years ago, or 2 years ago or so, I don't remember when it was, I was in Washington and I happened to be in a medicine wheel on Orcas Island. And I was sitting there in a circle about to give a workshop when the golden angel appeared right in the middle of the circle and just looked at me. No one knew what was happening, but this is a big thing for me. The golden angel came right up to me and just turned and merged right over the top of me. And I knew in that moment that I understood that I had just made my connection with the higher self. And there was no more after that a sense of any need to ask anything. Because after that, it's just whatever I needed to know, I just knew. And I didn't have to try to plan or do anything. The reality just opened up for me and just did it on its own. Another level of communication with God began to take place. And I now know that this continues on in a growth process that goes on up all the way back to the source. Though it may continue on various stages and levels. I don't know what they are at this point. But every time we come to those bridges, we'll know what to do, and that will be step. And it's just another growth step, and we'll be easily able to accept it as we go into each one.
The spirit of the plants has come to me in the form of a beautiful dancing green woman. The spirit of the plants has come to me in the form of a beautiful dancing green woman. Her eyes filled me with peace. Her dance filled me with peace. Her eyes filled me with peace. Her dance filled me with peace. The spirit of the plants has come to me in the form of a beautiful dancing green woman. The spirit of the plants has come to me in the form of a beautiful dancing green woman. Her eyes filled me with peace. Her dance filled me with peace. Her eyes filled me with peace. Her dance filled me with peace. The spirit of the plants has come to me and has blessed me with great peace. The spirit of the plants has come to me and has blessed me with great peace. Her eyes filled me with peace. Her dance filled me with peace. Her eyes filled me with peace. Her dance filled me with peace. The spirit of the plants has come to me in the form of a beautiful dancing green woman.